I was sitting in front of the computer staring at my client's QuickBooks, wondering where did all these transactions come from and how am I going to get this cleanup done? Hi, I'm Veronica Wasek, the unstoppable introvert and founder of 5MB Academy. I help bookkeepers build unstoppable confidence and profitable services through diagnostics and cleanups. Over the 15 years that I own my own bookkeeping business, my team and I did hundreds of cleanups. But this video is about the story of my first cleanup. This was about 15 years ago. I think I had been in business maybe a year. And this client contacted me to do some training with her. And in fact, it was training on QuickBooks Desktop because the online version wasn't a thing yet. So she had me go to her office because it was desktop. I had to go to her office and I sat down right next to her. I remember doing that a lot, sitting right next to clients at their computer, looking at their QuickBooks. And she started showing me all the things that she needed help with. And I tried to kind of talk her through a few things, but as I worked with her, I realized that she needed a lot more help than just training. And in fact, it seemed like she had a pretty messy QuickBooks file. And so I got my courage up to say to her that, I think we're looking at a cleanup here. You need a lot more help than just training. And actually, she was very receptive. I think she understood that she was in over her head. And I took a look at her books. I did what would then become a diagnostic review. I didn't have a diagnostic review then. I just would look at clients' books for free and I tell them what was wrong. And so I did this diagnostic review and told her what I thought was wrong, what needed to be cleaned up. And I gave the client an engagement letter. I don't think I was even doing too many engagement letters then. So then the next challenge was, okay, how am I going to price this cleanup? Because I've never done a cleanup before. I really have no idea how long it's going to take. And then I really worried about how long will it take? How many hours will it take? And how am I going to price it? Did I really scope out the cleanup properly? Or maybe I've missed a few things. I don't know. So I was fairly concerned that I may not be charging enough. So I decided to estimate about how long I thought it would take me to clean everything up and ended up giving the client a range. And so while I, in my head, estimated the price on an hourly basis, I gave the client a range rather than an hourly rate. And by giving them a range, then that gave me some wiggle room in case I didn't scope it out correctly. So my next challenge was then the imposter syndrome because, okay, I've got this client. I think I can clean this up, but I've never done a cleanup. I really had to go back and think about what do I know and what do I not know. So I had been a CPA for 20 plus years. I had experience in accounting and bookkeeping. So that, okay, I feel a little better about that. I still had that imposter syndrome. I knew QuickBooks fairly well. The QuickBooks training back in that time was very strong. And I always knew that if I couldn't figure something out, I could go back and look at the Pro Advisor training. I could even take a copy of the client's QuickBooks desktop and play around with it, make sure that, okay, what I thought would fix something actually did. And so that helped me a lot to get that confidence and, still scared, but to feel that, okay, I can take on this client and I think I can deliver and I can take care of their cleanup for them. Another challenge I ran into as I got going with the cleanup was that back then, as I said, we were using QuickBooks Desktop, and you could make what we called an accountant copy of the desktop file, and you could work on it on your own and make adjustments and changes. And in theory, you could then take this file and put it back onto the client's QuickBooks desktop, and it would pick up all of the accountant entries, except for it didn't do that. And so I lost, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 hours of work in which I made all these changes. and then they didn't transfer over to the client's file. So I learned a big lesson then to work directly on the client's desktop file, just because I couldn't risk losing all that time and effort and then just have it disappear when I tried to put it on the client's QuickBooks. Another big challenge was with the bank reconciliations. So this client had just learned about the bank feeds in QuickBooks, and she was so excited she could connect her QuickBooks to her bank account. But I don't know what happened, or if she maybe connected to QuickBooks multiple times, or maybe the bank feeds weren't working very well. Maybe she connected to personal accounts. But when I went to look at her bank register, there were all these transactions that didn't belong. And to this day, I have no idea where they came from. I remember asking the client, okay, do you have any other bank accounts, credit card accounts, anything that we do not know about? She said, nope, these are the accounts. I think she had 3 bank accounts and maybe a couple of credit card accounts. And that's when I'm looking at her QuickBooks and just wondering, where do these transactions come from? Because I had no idea. But I learned a big lesson, and I think that's a lesson that eventually really gave me a lot of confidence. The lesson was that the bank statement is the source of truth, that I had to go by the bank statements and the credit card statements, and whatever else she had on her books didn't belong there because it wasn't on any statement. And I remember really worrying about it. Well, what if these transactions somehow are valid? And I thought, no, if these are all the bank statements and credit card statements that we have, and she has confirmed these are all the business statements, then these other transactions don't belong. And so I had to void them, remove them from her QuickBooks to then get what I call the pieces of the puzzle. So essentially, once you reconcile, you have all of the pieces of the puzzle there before you can move on to do other cleanup. So I got everything reconciled. So then the next step was looking at the categorization of transactions. There were a lot of miscategorized transactions, a lot to deal with. In fact, she had some transactions that were questionable. Are they business or are they personal? Like car payments for some fancy vehicles. And I struggled a lot with that. Well, what do I do? I asked the client about it, and I think she said, well, her CPA told her that they could do that. And I still thought, well, I don't know. Let me talk to her CPA. So the CPA actually said she was going to handle that on the tax side. So I felt better. I still wasn't 100% that that was the right treatment for it, but that's what the CPA said. So I made a notation in the QuickBooks file. Another important lesson that I learned from this cleanup was actually the communication with the CPA, getting direction from them, coordinating with them, showing them, like, hey, this looks questionable. What do you think? What do you want me to do about it? We had some adjustments that pertained to the prior year in which a tax return had already been done. And so I definitely had to talk to the CPA about that. And she told me how to handle that, how to record it in the current year so that then she could address it on the tax return. And that's one thing that's been very important to me as I've worked on cleanups, is to have that good relationship with the client tax professional to make sure that you're coordinating with them, because really you're working together for a common goal, and it's important to communicate with them. As I said, this was my first cleanup, and I did make a very big mistake. At least it was a big mistake for me. So I was so excited to finally get to the point of this cleanup is done, I thought so in my mind that it was done. And unfortunately, I sent the backup of the QuickBooks to the client's CPA, and she looked at it and she quickly let me know that I had made a mistake. Ah, that was just so discouraging because I had worked so hard on that cleanup, and I really prided myself in providing quality work, and especially to the client's CPA. But in the haste of trying to get everything done, I didn't review my work after I thought I was done. So that's one lesson I learned the hard way, but it was a great lesson to learn that you need to review your work after you have completed all of the steps. You need to make sure that everything looks right. Because I thought I had gone through all the steps of cleaning up, but I didn't go back and look at the financials and do that big picture review to make sure that things looked right. But thankfully, the client CPA was very understanding. She knew that I had been working very hard on this cleanup. And she said, no problem, just take care of that and we're good to go. And actually, she was super excited to get a clean set of books finally for her client so that she could do a tax return and have the confidence that she was using accurate financials for her client's tax return. So that was the story of my first cleanup. I doubted myself. I questioned some of the things that the client was doing. I learned to talk to their CPA. I learned to not make the mistake that I did of not reviewing my client's books before I released the financials to the CPA. And I learned a lot about the workflows that go behind a cleanup, the order of work that you should be following. And really, that set the foundation for doing hundreds of cleanups after that. Do me a favor, if you found this interesting, if you think you'd like to hear more about my cleanup stories, leave a comment for me and let me know. I read all of your comments. It would encourage me to make more videos like this. And check out my free resource, the Smart Review Checklist, where I show you how I review my clients' books in just 15 minutes. Look for the link in the description below. And remember, if this introvert can do it, you can do it too. I'll see you next time.